everyone to the Cleantech Conversations, which is the first in our series of live discussions brought to you by the National Cleantech Conference and Exhibition. My name is Tiffany Bauer and I'm the Program Director for NCTCE 2021. And on behalf of the team, thank you to everyone for joining us today. So just while everyone is logging on, just a few housekeeping notes. We encourage everyone to ask questions throughout the session, and you'll see at the bottom of your screen there's a Q&A icon. So if you click on there, you'll be able to enter in your questions, and I will definitely now be moderating these along with our facilitator Tracy Armstrong as well. So this session will run for approximately 45 minutes. I hope to also be doing a live poll throughout, so look out for that. And please note that this session will be recorded and we will make it accessible to everyone who registered after today as well. So our topic of conversation today is how are local government sustainability leaders preparing for the next normal? And this session is also proudly supported by Local Government Focus. I'd just like to introduce our panel facilitator, Tracy Armstrong, who I'm really sorry we can't see at the moment, but hopefully I'll get that fixed up shortly. Tracy is the Senior Program Manager for Climate Response at Knox City Council. Tracy is responsible for researching, preparing and leading the development of the climate response plan for the Knox community. And some of you may also know her from her previous role as Deputy Director at the City's Partnership. So Tracy, I might just hand over to you now. We're at 46 participants, which is fantastic. So I'll hand over to you and you can introduce the rest of our panel.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tiffany, and welcome everybody. As Tiffany mentioned, she's going to be attempting to ensure that you can see me soon, but at the moment I'm going to be a disembodied voice. What I'd like to do is, we do have quite a lot to get through today, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of wonderful contribution from everybody. So I'd like to jump straight into introducing the panelists that we have today. And like me, one of the panelists is not yet visible, but he is there waiting in the wings as well. So first of all, hopefully you can all see Tina Freeman. She's from the City of Greater Geelong. Tina's worked with businesses and the public sector to improve performance through sustainability in Australia and the UK. Her approach is both strategically driven and practically focused. This is reflected in her achievements over a 20-year career. Tina has been involved with developing markets for sustainable goods and services for most of her career. Most recently, she's been working on a partnership program to inspire opportunities for clean technologies. The Cleantech Innovations Geelong program has resulted in job creation, skills development and business expansion outcomes for the Greater Geelong community. So I'm sure that Tina's going to have a wonderful amount to contribute to our discussion today. You'll also see Scott Bruce, who is the Industry Advancement Lead for the Clean Technologies and Advanced Manufacturing Development for Sunshine Coast Council. And Scott is proudly part of the Sunshine Coast Council's Economic Development Branch and leads industry advancement for clean technologies and manufacturing industries for the Sunshine Coast Council. With a strong private sector background, Scott's been an economic development specialist in regional, industry and business development for over 17 years, with 12 years with Queensland Government before joining the Sunshine Coast Council team. Hello, let me see if I can get my video on. It looks like we might have some success. Sorry for the interruption here. There we go.
Hey,
hello, everybody. Here we are. I'll jump back into Scott. So Scott was one of the drivers and project managers of the Interregional Cleantech Conferences and exhibitions held in the Sunshine Coast in 2016 and 2017, which with its successes has grown now to the National Clean Technologies Conference and Exhibition in 2019, proudly and professionally run by Nectar Creative Communications. We also have with us Troy Mcgrath. Is it Mcgrath or Mcgrath, Troy?
Mcgrath, as in Glenn Mcgrath, yes.
That's
correct.
What I thought. Wonderful. And Troy is the Senior Manager for Market Development, City Smart Brisbane. And across the past 5 years, Troy's helped grow City Smart's corporate partner base to include some of Australia's best recognised brands. The connections and collaborations he has created continue to drive significant corporate investment into a range of highly innovative sustainability initiatives across climate change and climate resilience, waste, water, transport, and energy. In doing so, Troy has shown he's capable of successfully engaging with a diverse set of corporates on sustainability issues and converting positive talk into enduring positive action. Prior to working with CitySmart, Troy spent 20 years working across a variety of business development and executive roles across media, government, universities, and not-for-profits. And we also welcome Declan, who is now on our screens as well. And Declan is the Deputy Lord Mayor of the City of Newcastle and the Executive Officer for the Hunter Water Corporation. So he's been the Deputy Lord Mayor and Councillor for the City of Newcastle, representing the Labor Party, elected at a by-election in February 2015 and re-elected in September 2017. As I mentioned, he's the Executive Officer to the Managing Director at Hunter Water Corporation. He has a Masters of Sustainable Urban Development and at the University of Oxford, and is an Environmental Engineering graduate, Honours Class 1, with a thesis in Biodiversity Offset and Conservation Policy. So we've got a range of really wonderful local government and industry expertise across our people today. So now we do have a lot of discussion points. So rather than the usual presentations by everybody and then Q&A at the end, what we're going to do today is actually just begin a conversation from our discussion points, and then we will still have time for Q&As from our audience and participants that Tiffany will be coordinating through the Q&A component. So I might just kick off. We've got probably quite a lot to get through today. The first discussion point we'll be talking about is obviously, as Tiffany mentioned right at the beginning, we're looking at the COVID pandemic that we're all experiencing, along with the summer bushfires and floods, which has highlighted that healthy and resilient cities, communities, and societies are more important than ever. As attention turns to the post-pandemic phase, what role will Sustainable Development Goal projects play in local government recovery plans? So local governments all around the country are now looking at recovery plans and how they can help their communities. And the first discussion point around this is, are these crises presenting an opportunity to rebuild or reboot in a sustainable way, helping to make sustainable development become a priority for local government? So rather than directing this to a specific person, I'd like to open it up to our panel if there's somebody that would like to kick this off.
Sure, I'm happy to if you'd like. That's get the show underway. I made a couple of notes around this point, just in terms of, I guess, setting the scene. Is I think we've got a very unique opportunity right now that obviously hasn't presented before in our lifetimes. In our business, in and around, particularly in the Brisbane context, the Brisbane City Council is our number one sort of shareholder and partner in many things we do, but we also work with a lot of other different scales and sizes of local governments, particularly in the southeast Queensland area. And many of them right now are going through a whole rethinking and reviewing process, and they are resetting what the normal is and trying to understand how to reframe their business models in many respects. And that's very rare for local governments. They've been pretty much the same kind of structure for a very, very long time, as we all know, and I'm sure Declan will talk to that as well. And really, everything's on the table. The organisations themselves, their businesses as well, they're looking for better ways to do things, challenging the status quo of operations and activities that they've never, ever challenged probably for a very, very long time, outside of the political debate, more so in a very much a delivery sense. So options are on the table, which is fantastic. So good for us, I think, in the space we're all in. What also leads to my optimism is prior to this scenario we're in now, there was a real, I guess, shift of concern around community lifestyle. How do we govern our local participation in our community, and also what that meant for livability and productivity. And the word resilience was starting to come out and was starting to become a central theme. And a lot of governments have started to use that as a sort of a framework to start creating some certainty and security expectations from local communities started to change about wanting their local government to do something about these concerns, as opposed to leaving it up to state and federal governments. So that was really starting to become the central dialogue prior to our current situation. So councils are seen by local ratepayers as delivery agents, and very uniquely placed. You know, they're one step removed from the constituents, so the best place to get things done. So, you know, several months now into this, we've got a chance to change the rules of the governance game, and in all sorts of ways. And I think ultimately it presents a great opportunity for a new normal in partnering with community, partnering with local government, partnering with industry. So hence why I think it plays into sort of our collective hands and what we're all trying to do. The other interesting stats that have come out recently through the Edelman Trust Survey just the last few days or week or so, you see some numbers supporting this in terms of record levels of trust in government, even above the typical leaders in that space. And even the energy sector trust levels are going up. So we were in a very unique time to actually have a very deep, long conversation, a thoughtful conversation. So I'm hopeful that's going to lead to a new normal that makes effectively the work that we do around the sustainability space fully integrated, not just in the terms of the environment, but in terms of health benefits and economic benefits, which collectively are going to make us a more secure, more stable economy at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Thank you, Troy. Would anybody else like to jump in on their opinions on this? I was wondering. Oh, yes. Yep.
Oh, yeah, that's okay. Yeah, look, I guess not trying to be a Queensland dominant jumping in here, but look, yeah, I just wanted to cite, I guess COVID's given us all an opportunity to assess what we've done and the way we've done it, and what to leave behind in our old world. And I guess I've heard the term, we've been slingshotted into a new world, and we've got an incredible opportunity to move forward, acknowledging what is important. For us, our natural environment and therefore our way of life is why the Sunshine Coasters are so passionate that our region has a balanced, sustainable development with our environment as a key driver, which our community rightly demands and we protect first and foremost. Yes, the term unprecedented, I can't even say it now, unprecedented times has shown us that as a human race, we are vulnerable, and our region is well placed, I think, and very clear and with well communicated strategic planning frameworks, which we guide and support sustainable development in our region. I don't think we need a reboot here, but I think as a nation generally, there's a lot said about sustainability, circular economy, and clean tech. Yet the interpretation of these words seem pretty wide, varied, and probably misunderstood in a lot of cases. For me, as I work, primarily, trying to support clean tech, I relate clean tech, and I just wanted to get this out, as better solutions with improved efficiencies, which provides a lower impact in our environment. This, of course, includes better investment in better solutions for water, waste, energy, and of course our environment, how we plan our cities, what we expect from our buildings and all the associated infrastructure, and providing a footprint and a lower environment. I guess for me, clean tech is the now and the future, and I believe we all will have to do more with less, with continuous improvement being the mantra. I guess that's why clean tech is one of the 7 high-value industries supported by our council under our region economic development strategy, but it's balanced with our environment and livability strategy. And these two key strategy gives us clear direction, measurable actions, and informs clear expectations on sustainable development for this region. So I guess to summarise, I think the crisis does give us all the opportunity to rebuild our economies and demand and do whatever we can to do more with less impact and waste.
That's great. Thank you, Scott. So would you say that, given that there has been such a focus at Sunshine Coast on sustainability and clean tech in the past, that it's easier for you than perhaps some other councils to move towards a post-COVID recovery using more clean tech than, as your policies may already support that uptake? Has there been something that you think has increased the appetite for it at the moment?
Yeah, look, I guess coming back to that opening phrase, our natural environment and sustainable economic development is just so critical. So for us, having this frameworks in place, it's about getting your regions to be together, to understand what you're trying to achieve. That it is open. You have open governing. That anyone that comes to your region knows what you expect from sustainable development. And I think having those reference strategies and frameworks in place goes a long way towards delivering that. Great.
Can I ask for a councillor perspective, Declan? So we're hearing from the people on the ground who are developing these policies and so on, but from another renewable area, obviously Newcastle's forging ahead in that way. What's the appetite within council, do you think, for a post-COVID green recovery?
Great to be part of the conversation, and certainly agree with the comments from Troy and Scott in terms of the fact that there's this amazing opportunity now to invest, particularly in clean tech. If people haven't read it, I'd just draw people's attention to a really valuable opinion piece that was published a couple of weeks ago in the New York Times by the UN Secretary General, calling for a green recovery to COVID and talking about the duality of challenges between recovering from the COVID crisis and also addressing climate change, and the importance of creating green jobs in particular. And that's a challenge that isn't lost on councils like Newcastle, of course. We're an industrial city. We're the world's largest coal exporting port. We have a long history as a carbon intensive city and are undergoing a pretty rapid transition towards a green city. But that means that we need to be able to take our communities along the journey and ensure that there are green jobs as part of that process. And so that's something that I've certainly been pretty passionate about across my time as a councillor. And I'm seeing a lot of community support for. So just in relation to COVID, obviously all of us are joining you, and I suppose most of the audience as well, from our homes, and people are getting back out and engaging with nature at a neighbourhood level. I've heard in my community of amateur birdwatching societies kicking off, of people going and enjoying parks and the like, and this greater focus on active transport as well. The fact that in particular has been seen as a strategy of getting people back into our major cities when public transport networks aren't able to provide the commuting support that they normally would. There is this opportunity with so much community support to have a courageous conversation around addressing climate and energy issues. And it's something that the City of Newcastle has done. Right now, simultaneously with this conversation, actually, we're hosting a community engagement session via Zoom on our climate action plan for 2025. Our current climate action plan expires this year, and I'm pleased to say that we've been able to achieve an awful lot of the goals that we set ourselves, including a 77% reduction in our emissions based on 2008 levels, which is just, frankly, extraordinary. I'm so proud of the staff and the effort that's occurred, and largely driven by the fact that we've invested as a council in our own large-scale renewable energy facility with a 5 megawatt solar farm, and also signed 100% renewable PPA with a local wind farm, which is generating jobs within our area. We've had the import of turbines, as well as some of the local componentry made locally. And so we're able to tell the story and demonstrate that connection back to local jobs and opportunities.
That's great. Thank you, Declan. Tina, I wanted to, first of all, ask if you had anything to add to that, but I also have a specific question for you if you don't.
Thanks, Tracy. And look, on behalf of the City of Greater Geelong, I'd like to thank you for being here to mediate this session. It's wonderful to have the opportunity to be on a panel with such an illustrious bunch of panellists. And thank you to Tiffany there in the background, working feverishly to make sure that we can all communicate with each other at this time. On behalf of the City of Greater Geelong too, I'd like to thank NCTCE and the local government focus folks, and of course Nectar, for helping to make this kind of webinar possible. For us in the City of Greater Geelong, listening to the experiences of the other panellists, there's a lot that's shared. So I'm pleased to hear that, for us to know that we're not alone, and we're all, as they say, in this together, and our experiences seem to be quite shared. I'm based in the Economic Development Unit at the City of Greater Geelong, which for those of our participants, and thank you too for joining us, participants, for those participants who haven't heard of Geelong, we're the biggest regional city in Victoria. We are undergoing substantial growth and will do urban growth over the next 30 years. So we have a lot to think about in terms of what our future looks like, in particular in relation to sustainability issues. We are well known for our industry. In the past, that has been traditional manufacturing, and these days it's very much advanced manufacturing and industry, and all sorts of sectors, including health sector and clean technologies, that are coming to our patch to be able to operate. When COVID hit, we were in actually a really strong position in relation to our sustainability strategizing, and we have been able to, during the social distancing restrictions, to still release and still get community feedback about some really important strategies that we're releasing and working on. They're strategies that are updates of existing statements of intent around sustainability. Our waste and resource recovery strategy has just been released, and that very much sits squarely within a focus on market development for secondary resources and circular economy. We've got a sustainability framework that is being generated to be able to sit above all of our strategies and guide what we do, so that we're thinking about social, environmental and economic impacts in all of the decisions that we make. We were recently designated a UNESCO City of Design, so that means we have to be very clear about what the Sustainable Development Goals mean to us as a city, and particularly as a council in the ways that we operate. So there are a number of things that were happening anyway. And of course, when COVID hit, in answer to your question about are we rebooting, is it illuminating things for us? Yes, it's rebooting us in a different way. Of course, in the early stages, it was all about our rapid response, and we have had to have our skates on to be able to respond in a way that our community has needed us to. And thankfully, a few months after a number of support packages have been released, we're getting positive feedback from our community about that rapid response, which is terrific. But in relation to projects and activities that we are doing that are specifically related to sustainability, those activities and projects haven't lost their luster. They've become very much important projects and grant schemes and programs that we're running that our community and indeed our councillors want us to keep doing, because in their eyes, those projects, those grants, those programs are assisting our community from all different sectors, not just our residents, but everybody, helping our community to get to the other side of COVID-19 and focus on the recovery. And so it's been seen by our council as a very positive step forward, all of those sustainability projects, programs and grants.
That's wonderful. So that does actually lead into the thing I wanted to ask next, which was wondering whether this disruption has enabled councils to undertake projects that they wouldn't normally do, or bring shovel-ready projects forward. Obviously, we're speaking in a clean tech or sustainable projects kind of manner, but has this created the opportunity to bring forward some projects that might have taken a bit more of a backseat previously? I'm going to happy to open this up to anybody who would like to answer this one.
I'm happy to jump in. Just from my own experience, the answer's yes. I think that everybody is a Keynesian now in terms of bringing forward economic stimulus and shovel-ready projects, and certainly we're focused on ones that have that meet the strategic aims of being able to support the transition of our local economy. And so just one example is we've brought forward a major organic waste recycling facility because we know that it has quite a few jobs in construction. It's got a positive business case. Fortunately, we don't need to borrow money for this particular project, but if we did, you've got record low interest rates and investment opportunities. And so it certainly makes sense. I'm not shying away, and I'm happy to defend running a budget deficit in order to deliver programs in the coming financial years that are of long-term strategic benefit to our communities.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. Troy, a big city perspective.
Yeah, I mean, we're a subsidiary of a wholly owned subsidiary of Brisbane City Council, so we sort of operate at double arm's length, if you like, but we're certainly very close to trying to help the city drive outcomes through their clean, green, sustainable strategy with industry partners. So that's basically how we do this piece of work. And fundamentally, what I've seen in the last sort of 3 months or so is it's a very laser-like, sharper focus on what is going to be bang for buck in terms of outcomes, and some of the KPIs or objectives that Declan was just mentioning around the economic and environmental outcomes, but also jobs, obviously. And for Brisbane, it's been very much centred, as we sort of read the market, around the small, medium enterprise sector. A lot of the big corporations are a little more able to withstand these tough times for longer. But obviously, as we know, small business in particular is the heart and guts of our national economy and locally. So that's where the focus has been. How do we enable those businesses to not only reopen, but reopen and get back to something like they were prior to COVID-19? So we're working with those industry partners to try and bring those things forward. So yes, there's a heightened sense to hurry some of those things up that may have been in the pipeline. But there's also a lot of questions around what else can we do that actually facilitates and stimulates those activities that doesn't always need to have the city's budget involved. Trying to bring those partnerships together, and ultimately that's where we're going to start to see some new ways of doing things in terms of how we actually fund things. Some of those private public partnership ideas that we've all been looking at for the last little while.
Great. Tina or Scott, anything to add from your perspective?
Thanks, Tracy. I'd like to just pick up on the grants offers in a particular program that we run, our partnership program that you mentioned in my introduction, called Cleantech Innovations Geelong. That's all about market development for clean technologies. And one of the things that happened for us over the last few months was we were had been in the process for asking for expressions of interest for demonstration projects of clean technologies to set up shop on our patch. And the decision-making process faltered a little come March, where our advisory board for that program had to take a step back and figure out whether they thought it was a good idea to proceed with issuing grants to businesses. And they came to the quite solid conclusion that it was absolutely imperative to continue to support projects with investment. And then the one proviso became us asking those project proponents, tell us what the impact of COVID-19 has been on your business. Tell us how you are managing the risks associated with being able to operate. Are you still going to be able to run this project now? Do you need to delay this project till later in the year or perhaps even next year? We worked with the project proponents to be able to identify whether now was the right time to even invest in them. And fortunately, all of the project proponents are operating terrifically and have been really strong through these difficult times, which was great news to us too, that the investment that we're able to put into them enabled them to keep doing what they were doing and develop products and do research and development for the next iteration of products and services that they're able to offer the market, which has been really reassuring to us that we're making the right decisions to invest in the right place. And I pulled a link from a radio program at the weekend to share with our advisory board to let them know how much they are bang on with that kind of attitude, because the program was talking about a number of activities, particularly around decarbonising our economy. And one of the speakers from ClimateWorks, the CEO of ClimateWorks, mentioned that it just so happens that our COVID recovery needs are about investment. We need large-scale investment. And what do you know, when it comes to clean technologies or circular economy or a whole ramp of other sustainability activities and projects, they too need investment, and they can deliver the kinds of recovery outcomes that we are looking for. And so I was really reassured to hear that on a national scale, that at our local level we are taking advantage of the opportunities that we have to continue to invest towards recovery.
That's wonderful. That's great. Scott, did you have anything? regarding this?
Look, I think it's what's been discussed is, and it's been some great examples of very quick action by councils and local government that are taking up, if you like, regional leadership in this regard. But with the current crisis, like all regions, looking at our capital works programs, bringing forward as many as possible to stimulate the economy. But and I guess the point being made by Tina is investment and support for investment, being able to communicate that your region is open for business, that if you need help to get this going, we're here to help you, and we want to hold your hand and get this happening. So yeah, it's I'm sure every council's the same. It hasn't stopped us from doing anything at this point in time except reassess and really acknowledge the importance of support. At the end of the day, it's private enterprise which is going to drive the change. Governments can support and governments can be part of the equation, but governments is about obviously giving a platform and an environment for investment to know that they can confidently invest in your region.
That's great. That actually ties in really nicely to a couple of questions that have come through on the Q&A, and we were going to wait until the end, but I might just call them out now because they do relate very much to what we've just been discussing. So the first one is asking, it's actually directly to you, Scott, and that one is mentioning that they like the clarity that you provide around what clean tech means. Do you think that there's a clear understanding of what circular economies are? How would you describe them, and what priority is it for your council? But that also leads into the next question as well, which I think is for everybody. With the economic development focus, do you have specific KPIs relating to measuring your progression towards a circular economy? And if you so, can you give any examples? So I'm not sure, Scott, if you would like to take the first little bit about if you're thinking that there is a clear understanding of what a circular economy means to people. And then we could perhaps open it up around KPIs to anybody.
Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you. I guess from my perspective, I think people understand what a circular economy is, but I don't think we've really explored what detail is actually sits in and what benefits that we can really drive from a circular economy. From a Sunshine Coast Council perspective, yes, it's of highest priority to us, and we're certainly looking at opportunities to obviously embrace and do more as a circular economy. But we still have a little way to go in that regard, and I think that's something that COVID's going to bring out even more so now, certainly around potentially a slightly reduced ERP, and certainly the need to do more for less, as I said before. So does that answer the question okay?
I hope so. And around KPIs, do any of the councils that are represented here today have KPIs around progression towards circular economy?
I'll just jump in there quickly, Tracy, just in terms of the
Absolutely.
projects that we get and programs we get involved in. I guess broadly speaking, it obviously depends on the client and what they're trying to achieve and their objectives, but the two key things that matter is one, there's a business case that stacks up behind the project or program, and therefore it has not just longevity, but it becomes in itself self-sustaining. So otherwise you build a project or a solution, which is great, and then of course it runs out of funding and you get back to where you started from, and you lose people on the way. And it's this whole sustainability journey we're all on is about getting people's confidence to a point where they want to invest themselves, either personally or with their business or with their corporation, these types of circular solutions. So certainly, yeah, the project or program has to have that as an initial KPI. The actual thing must stand up and it must deliver long-term and ongoing outcomes for the city or that community in which it will operate. Part of that also is then having that market development piece in circular economy. That's probably the hard part. Often there's lots of great components to creating a circular process, but we need to have a market in which those products need to be recirculated and or repurposed through. So that's probably the key, I think, for councils around the country. I know a lot of them are working on building the right kinds of structures and infrastructure and processes to support that, so that we actually truly can keep materials in the economy for longer, which is ultimately what we're trying to achieve.
If I could add to that, Tracy, our experience with the Cleantech program is that folks, the circular economy conversation is very new in the state of Victoria. We've just had our Recycling in Action Victoria, or Recycling in Victoria strategy that's been released, and that's being sort of labelled as our circular economy policy for the state, even though its title suggests perhaps it's not. Actually, the content of that strategy is responding directly to the needs of our state in terms of the recycling crisis and a number of recycling service providers going under, and it has a very strong focus on circular economy as part of that response. Our Cleantech program that our council's been involved in, we focus on, of all of the 14 subsectors or whatever there are, however many there are now, of clean technologies. Our stakeholders said they wanted our program to just focus on waste efficiency, water efficiency and energy efficiency. And so when our policy came about at state level, we'd already been doing a number of projects that were waste related and had started conversations. In fact, we've got a tendering exercise that's going on at the moment. We're at expression of interest phase for what we call procurement for innovation, and that expression of interest was about finding out how we can apply circular economy principles to our road infrastructure products, and not by just burying materials under the surface of road infrastructure products, but actually using secondary materials and materials that can be easily recovered and reused again, and so on and so forth, on the surface of road infrastructure products, whether it be pavements or curbs and guttering or road surfaces themselves. And so we have been proactively working with our suppliers to figure out how they can respond to that, what support they need to be able to respond to that kind of a need, as our engineers have identified it. They've identified we need to apply circular economy principles to one of the major products that we buy as a council. And so that's taught us a lot about what our community and our suppliers know about circular economy, and it's a learning curve. It's a learning curve for them and for us. In answer to your question about specific KPIs related to circular economy, and the question that came through about that, just quickly I would say not yet, but certainly our Cleantech program, for the funding that we've secured across ourselves, our industry partner in the Geelong Manufacturing Council and the state government, there are job creation, job maintenance, skills development, business expansion KPIs associated with spending that money on doing what we're doing. So yes, there's KPIs there. One's directly for circular economy, not yet, but I suspect they're coming.
Yeah, so, and I mean, the outcome is the same anyway.
That's right.
Looking for.
Exactly.
I know. Sorry, Tracy. I just know some councils are starting to build in their procurement practices, percentages of materials to be included in products and services that are purchased going forward, which is starting to stimulate, that process of obviously reusing, repurposing, at least importing some of those things that Tina was talking about.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Declan, just before we move on quickly, is there anything you wanted to add, or are you happy to move on? We've got lots of questions and only a little bit of time, but I'm absolutely keen to hear what Newcastle is doing in this space.
Very quickly, I think it's probably fair to say that the circular economy component is one of the less developed components of our environmental strategies. Part of that is because we've just focused on the true local government end, which has been around waste and something that we've got quite tangible involvement with. Of course, we're utilising procurement strategies in the way that we procure capital works in particular to look at how we can further the circular economy, but it does really require the overarching policy from the state and federal government. And that's where I'd say one of the key opportunities for us with the circular economy is in New South Wales, we've got a conservative state government and conservative, obviously, national government as well. But there is a willingness from both of those governments to talk about the circular economy, which is providing an inroad to have these broader conversations about sustainability. So I'd certainly be encouraging our staff to capitalise on that as an opportunity.
Great, thank you, Declan. Just before we move on to the next question, which is a really interesting one from one of our participants, Tiffany has asked me to let you know that there will be a poll popping up on your screens. If a very, very quick poll, there it is. So if we could just take a quick moment to answer that. And what I'll do is, whilst people are doing that, I'll ask the next question, which comes from Blair. And she is asking to the panel as a whole, is the lack of a federal green stimulus plan and framework a big problem for everyone? Or are we finding councils and state government are doing well to fill the gap to help drive good projects with solid guidance to ensure they're not just business as usual? Would anybody like to jump in there? Yes, Declan.
Happy to jump in and say, yes, we would really like there to be a coherent federal package on green stimulus, particularly coming out of the COVID crisis. Unfortunately, local government has done a terrific job in responding, and certainly I can talk at length about the Newcastle examples, but we were really left to hang out to dry by the federal government. We weren't eligible for the JobKeeper payment, for example, despite having to close a whole range of our different services. As much as I might like us to be, we're not a currency issuing government, and so we can't just have unlimited debt, and there is a burden that our ratepayers will pay. We do require assistance and a coherent narrative and approach from the Commonwealth Government. And we've been advocating as a city for there to be a green new local deal, particularly focused on the reforms that we saw in the 80s and 90s and the stimulus that we know local government is really good at delivering, because we're able to mobilise quickly and deliver capital works in communities right across the country. So I would absolutely be an advocate for, yes, we do need a coherent federal approach, and any federal green support would be very much appreciated in Newcastle.
Absolutely, I don't think that anyone will be arguing.
Yep, no, thumbs up.
But any further points from any of the panelists on that?
I'll just take that a step further, Declan. Nationally, there's a collaboration opportunity that I imagine there's some very common, without talking to every council in the country, there'll be a very common set of circumstances, criteria and problems, many of which you probably consider in that particular plan, that could be applied collectively across the country from the federal government to support infrastructure type investment in and with local governments, and that would enable a lot more bang for buck, and of course a huge amount of cost benefit for the country, and that would then also create obviously a continuity for every constituent, irrespective of where they live. So there's a great opportunity right now to solve those problems and obviously drive economic benefit out of that as well.
Great, thank you, Troy. Briefly, anything from Tina or Scott before moving on? Or you
all terrific points, well made.
Great.
Yeah, I concur, and I guess it's about having a head of power, and of course anything to do with investment needs a head of power to be able to do that. So having a national stance would help councils a long way, and private investment to be able to do that.
Absolutely, we need that surety of policy sitting underneath that, definitely.
Yep.
I'm going to ask one last question, because then we'll open it up to, we do have questions coming through the Q&A, and we're nearly at time to do that, but there is one question I just really wanted to ask, which is, what are your local communities asking for right now? What's the feedback from your communities? What do they want from you in this space? And I'm happy to take that from anybody.
Oh, well, I'll jump in if you want. Okay, well, of course, right now, I guess our communities are very focused on dealing with the response from the COVID lockdown. So, as I said before, our communities greatly value our natural environment, but they demand sustainable economic development, balancing, protecting our region. I guess the way our council operates and plans for our futures based on improving and embedding sustainability, and we work hard to partner with our communities. That's one thing that we've been able to engage, and I know the councils that are on here have done a similar great job in doing that. So I'm not saying we couldn't improve what we do, but these times actually reinforce the importance of what we do and why we do it and how we can do it. I guess that's probably key. As I said, we have to learn to do more with less. We have to have support. And I know our communities expect and demand nothing less. So as I said, like our country working through our COVID lockdown and containment, we've seen us working together as a country to do the right thing for us, and sustainability and what that means is the core. Sustainability is the core of that. So I think COVID has given us that opportunity to really get that conversation out.
Great, thank you, Scott. Anybody else want anything to add on that?
Yeah, I'll just add, with some of the communities we run, in terms of particularly household communities, a lot of people are asking the question, what can I do? We've found even this, our communication open rates have been lifting through this period. People trying to find tangible things to empower them, because people do feel a little disempowered right now as something completely left field's just changed their life. So that's enabled a whole suite of other activities as well. And we've just launched a couple of programs with small business and with community sports clubs, working with some of our corporate partners to actually facilitate opportunities for them to improve things like energy efficiency and waste efficiency, and how they actually, for example, manage their water consumption in their sports fields, stuff like that. And that also translates back to the household and the garden and all those sort of simple things, which creates a sense of well-being and health, and then the connectivity back to the environment. So that whole circle is really becoming powerful, because people are really looking for something to hang on to. So I guess that's the grassroots of the human condition. People are very much trying to find some normality and also some connection with others, and that's where that sports club stuff has been very powerful as well.
I agree, that's great.
If I could add to that quickly, for us at the City of Greater Geelong, it's been, of course, the obvious things, because loss of jobs are hitting people's back pockets. So rates relief requests, the freezing of fees and charges, and helping job seekers to transition to new sectors. So some of those things our Cleantech work relates to, some of those things it doesn't. But certainly in terms of what Troy was just talking about, the looking for opportunities to make business operations more efficient, make households more efficient when it comes to the use of resources. Our community's asking for more of that information, and certainly the participation in the webinars and things that have cropped up over the last few months around those issues for either businesses or householders has escalated. So everyone's looking for opportunities to reduce their costs. The jobs and transitioning sectors work, our Cleantech stuff is very much squarely aligned with that. So in that respect, we just keep doing what we're doing. One of the things I think which has been very interesting to watch is, with people being at home more, they're more aware of what's in their backyard, in their neighbourhood, is what I mean by their backyard. And they're actually saying, we want more open space, please. So the kinds of things that allow them to be in their neighbourhood more, because now they have to be. They actually quite like being in their neighbourhood, but they'd like to see more green outdoor space. And so I think that's going to be a really interesting upshot for local councils in how we respond to that.
That's a very good point. And anecdotally, even though I'm not a panelist, I'm a facilitator, I can let you know that in Knox City Council, that's definitely the case. People are out walking their dogs in the parks, in air, people that never walked their dogs before. Where did they come from? They must have been just in their backyards. But they're in their spaces, and they have to be. So yeah, it's a real opportunity, isn't it, to really ground people back in their local areas. So I just wanted to throw that in, because it's definitely the case for us as well. Declan, did you have anything to add to this before we move on?
No, I made similar comments at the opening remarks. My dog certainly has never been more walked in his life, so I can understand the feeling.
Definitely. Okay, well, we've got about 8 minutes left, so I'll get to some of the questions that we've got in the Q&A, if that's okay. The first one we've got is a comment from Paul, and he says he mentors clean energy startups through CSIRO and Energy Lab. Many of these companies are developing world-leading tech of direct relevance to local government, but they tend to avoid local government because of the bureaucratic decision-making and procurement processes. What are the panel's councils doing to make it simpler and faster to engage councils and implement pilot programs?
Good one.
We run, yeah, it is a great question. We run procurement for innovation deliberately to be able to bring in new ideas, entrepreneurial responses to problems that we have. That doesn't mean we speed things up, though. Procurement for innovation actually takes longer, and we do that deliberately because we want to work with the suppliers to be able to create a response to a problem that we've identified, and we allow time, and in some instances it's a couple of years for the market to respond to that problem. So we've used that method twice now, and it's been a really terrific way to work with suppliers, well, in our state, but also nationally in our first procurement for innovation exercise, which was about waste and cost reduction in relation to recreational bridges. And the most recent one is the one that I mentioned before about applying circular economy principles to road infrastructure products. We work with the suppliers who step up to the ask that we're making of them, and we work with them then to come up with the solutions. So we haven't sped things up, we've actually slowed things down, and that's enabled us to be able to bring in more of these new products and these entrepreneurial businesses and startups that have got such great opportunities for us to grab hold of in terms of creating solutions to the problems we have.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Tina. Anybody else like to jump in?
Yeah, I could jump in. I know the Brisbane City Council has been, I guess, trying to change its space for a few years now, and they've come up with a Better Brisbane proposal program, which allows for market-led proposals to bring unique solutions into the city, into the broader, not just the city, but the broader LGA. And that's had some great success in launching opportunities for businesses to not only prove their products and demonstrate in a pretty big market, with 1.3 million people and a fairly big corporate base, which allows those businesses to springboard elsewhere, which has been really good export opportunity, not just a local opportunity. So some of those, I think, models are also operating in other councils as well, and I think that's been good. And yes, it can be slow, as Tina said, but they do actually stipulate some very strict timelines around how they respond to those proponents. Knowing full well that they need cash flow and ultimately they're going to be around in the future. So, so that's been a great success. The city runs an Innovate program as well each year, which basically brings community ideas together. It's a real ideation type program, runs over about 3 or 4 months to solve stated city problems. So that's another community-led process that has engaged a lot of people and come up with some great ideas. And the sustainability theme's been very central to both of those, which has been great.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Troy. I've got the 5-minute call as well, so we're nearly out of time today. We do have a couple more questions, but if there's anything burning that either Scott or Declan wanted to add to that.
I'll just very briefly jump in and say,
sure.
Newcastle has attempted to do this through our smart city strategy, and we've described the city as a living lab, and I know that's a terminology that's used in lots of different councils. Probably my role, though, as an elected representative is to help educate more broadly the community, and councils are exceptionally risk averse, and part of the risk aversion and therefore all of the processes that come is the risks of community backlash and embarrassment of elected people when things don't necessarily go to plan. And of course, that is a function of innovation, is that not everything is going to work. So I'm certainly happy to do what I can as an elected representative to make sure that we have a mature conversation about some of the risks and why it is that we would try and assist and support innovation. And that's quite nuanced and can be challenging at times.
Absolutely, but it is important to be allowed to fail, isn't it? But that is a very difficult message to get across to your communities. Definitely. Okay, I might just quickly jump in. What I'll do is I'm going to ask both of the last questions that we've got left, and I'm going to open it up to the panels to whichever one they would like to answer, or both if we've got time. So one of them is a great point, harkening back to the points made about the private industry driving change. Now, how does the panel look to address barriers to uptaking innovations in clean tech, along with long sales cycles, which further limit uptake? And the other question is asking how councils are keeping small to medium enterprises engaged in sustainability during this time. Many of the small to medium enterprises that MIN works with are purely focused on staying afloat and have lost all interest in sustainability. So I'm going to open it up for the last few minutes. Or maybe that was too tricky.
That's okay. Just taking the questions in.
That's right. So the first one is about barriers to uptaking innovations, and the other is about keeping small to medium enterprises engaged in sustainability at this time. So very different questions.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll talk from the work that I get involved in with both of these spaces. And two things is, I said before, number one, the business case has got to stack up. The nice to have conversation's a very tough one to have in a sales process. You really need to demonstrate what's in it for the person or the organisation in front of you, and what opportunities it brings for them in terms of increased sales, revenue, productivity, or decreasing their cost base, and making sure that's coupled with an environmental benefit. It's a really good proposition. Then you can have a sustainability conversation and not have to talk about all the green stuff, if that makes sense. And you get the outcome you want, and everyone is in a much better position. So they're trying to help small, medium enterprises. It's very much about, how does it solve the business problem that they have right now? And it might just be trying to keep the doors open and cash flow, or employees, or what have you, and sales coming through the door. We're also helping a lot of our small businesses in our business access other revenue sources or funding models. So we're supporting helping a whole heap of those in the Brisbane area around some grant programs that are available with the federal government at the moment. They're trying to help them do a project that has no cost to them, that would actually be beneficial to their bottom line, that has a sustainability outcome, for example. So there are ways to bring those elements together, but you can't have one without the other, is what I'm really saying. It's really important. And so, yes, the SMEs aren't going to listen unless there's something in it for them, which is totally a reasonable expectation.
Absolutely. We have 1 minute left if anyone has anything burning. Great. Okay. Well, I'm sure you actually all do have a lot more to say on these topics, but understand that we don't have the time to delve into it. So I will hand back over. Thank you very much for your time and for everybody's attendance. I'm going to hand back over to Tiffany for some final remarks, if she can come back on the line.
Hello. I hope everyone can hear me. Thank you to Tracy, Tina, Troy, Scott and Declan. Great conversation, and also to our audience. Thank you, those questions were really good, and I'm really pleased that we were able to get through them all. So thank you for that. I just wanted to say also a quick note that our next webinar is next Thursday, same time, same place, Building Back Better, What Does COVID-19 Mean for Cleantech? And that's going to be facilitated by Paul Hodgson from the National Energy Resources Australia, or NERA. That's now open for registration via the NCTCE website. So thank you once again, everyone. Really lovely to have you all here. And we got that technology working in the end, didn't we?
Perfect.
Well done for you, Tiff. And thank you, everybody, again, for your time and attention today. It's been wonderful to be part of this panel.
Great.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.